Welcome to the Holy Brother podcast, broadcasting with Shlomo Carlebach stories and teaching to spread light and love to the universe. So I'm going to say a beautiful story today that I heard from the book of Reb Shlomeleh by Rabbi Brandwein. So in 1970, the House in Love and Prayer not only existed in San Francisco. I think that's the more well-known House in Love and Prayer, but also in Kiryat Yovel, a little community in Yerushalayim. And this is where Rav Shlomo would send his students who he had brought back to Judaism, and they had almost no money, but they lived very, very humbly. These poor, holy Hippies would sit and study Torah and have musical sessions, and they had like no possessions, but they had a lot of simcha, and they had a tiny little house where the rain would trickle into the apartment, but there wasn't much gashmias, there wasn't much physicality, only a lot of love and spirituality and humility. Sometimes the neighbors didn't love all their singing and all the noise maybe that they were making. They didn't understand what these chevra were trying to do. In any case, that was the House of Love and Prayer in Kiryat Yovel. And Alex Scott was the leader of the community. One morning, he gets up early to go to drive to the airport, and he discovered that the entire house was ablaze. It wasn't clear, did someone burn it down? In any case, he dashed from room to room, waking up all of the holy Hippies who were using that as their dormitory. Thank God they saved also their kids who were sleeping in that same building, and everyone's life was saved. But meanwhile, the holy Hippolyte stood outside with their guitars, and they watched the entire house burn down. They watched all of their possessions burn down, and everything was reduced to ashes. And after a while, the victims recovered from their shock, and they were very sad. And they didn't have any money in their bank accounts. That was all of their possessions. And they sat there depressed and said, "What do we do?" One of them said, "Why don't we call the good rabbi? Let's call Reb Shlomo, who was in New York at the time. Maybe he can tell us what to do." As soon as Reb Shlomo heard about the disaster, he said the following: "This must be a sign from heaven. Our detractors wanted to see us perish in flames, but our merciful King, the Holy One, blessed be He, had compassion and rescued us from the blaze. It's a day for rejoicing. Blessed be the one who performed the miracle. Blessed be the Lord who watches over his people." And words that came from the heart entered into the heart. The people began to burst into dance and song. They struck up nigunim. They took the guitar, they took the flute, and they started dancing and singing. And for hours, they were singing. And they said al chaim. They had a little wine. The celebration lasted 2 entire days. At that point, journalists, photographers, the Israeli press, masses of regular Israeli folk just came to watch these Carlebachi Hasidic hippies who took a disaster and made it an amazing Kiddush Hashem. The House of Love and Prayer accepted God's decree and accepted God's judgment, and they did it cheerfully, like Nachamish Gamzu, saying Gamzu Latova, this too is for the best. This reminds me of a teaching Shlomo says in the beginning of this week's Parsha. The Golus begins, Rashi teaches, when Yaakov comes down to Mitzrayim, and that's why there's no break. There's no break between the end of Vayigash and Vayichi, because the Golus is beginning, and so the letters are together. You can't tell that it's a new Parsha. And Shlomo explained that what's real Golus? When we just take events, we don't have time to think about them. We don't have time to contemplate the great blessings that God places into our lives. But what's Geula consciousness? When we're able to have moichin de godless, to think, to deepen our understanding, and to even take seeming tragedies, when we look at it with eyes of Amunah, can take tragedies and understand that it's all for the best and make them blessings. And this is what students of Reb Shlomo were able to do. They were able to take what seemingly was a tragedy and make it into great blessing. And may we be blessed to live in Geula consciousness, where when things are good, we we breathe and we think about all the blessings in our lives. Every taste bud, every beautiful sight that we can see, every beautiful smell, where we're able to really have time to think about the blessings in our lives. That's Geula consciousness. When we're rushing from thing to thing and not able to really appreciate the blessings in our lives, that's Gullus consciousness. And when we're in Geula consciousness, we can even take seeming tragedies and make them into blessings. Have a beautiful day.